We'll run as soon as we can, because we're running pretty fast on this one. We need to go ahead and relieve the overcrowding and get the problem solved. So a year and a half from right now would be perfect. Yeah, it would.
Okay. You said that we needed to be more in line with Vestavia and Homewood, and that we look more like a county school. However, our millage rates with Birmingham right now is at 12.8, and Homewood is at 15.1, and Hoover is at 13.9, and we're right now at 21.9, and Vestavia is at 15.1, and we're already 45% higher, and if we do the tax, we're going to be 91% higher. So what are they doing that we're not doing with our school money, our school tax money?
The millage rates are, let me get my pointer. There we go. The current local millage rate for school systems is listed here. Okay. So what are they doing that we're not doing? I'm going to have to open that up.
Well, my document says different. My dad is the revenue director of Birmingham, and he has a whole completely different view on that. Because he... Yes, sir.
Did you get your numbers off of the Department of Revenue's website?
No, sir. I got it from my father.
Okay. Well, basically, these numbers come, as far as the millage rates, come off of the Alabama Department of Revenue's website. Any of you can go there. It's the 2013 millage rates. For school systems in Jefferson County, it's a little confusing in that we have 12 school districts in Jefferson County. So depending on when a school system broke out of Jefferson County, you have two different types of taxes, a district tax and a local municipal tax pledged toward education. Mm-hmm. So if you add the district tax for that school system plus the municipal tax pledged toward education, that's where you come up with these numbers. And I have them. I'll be happy to provide them to anybody.
I mean, I understand it clearly. I'm just saying.
But that's where the numbers come from.
I'm not arguing with you. I'm just telling you he went over it with me last night. There's no need to get upset with me. I'm just telling you what he told with me. I was just asking where the money came from. I was just asking what the difference is that they're doing that we're not doing, I guess, why we actually need a tax increase. That was all I was asking.
I can give you a few quick answers of what they're doing that we're not doing. Number one, they're not educating students in portables. And number two, when you look at the cost per student as it relates to student achievement, you can compare ACT scores, and we're doing the best we can with pushing our numbers up, but the foundational program is K through 5. And so you have smaller classes, you have science labs, you have places where they can learn in different ways, and they're not educated in the portable buildings. Is that not what you're thinking?
Dr. Neal, I think her question. Don't let me say this is your question if it's not. I think her question is, if I understand her, it's her understanding that our millage is already higher than Mountain Brook, Vestavia, Homewood, Vestavia, and others. And what we're saying is the millage is not higher. Our millage is a lot lower. I understand you've got numbers from somewhere. Okay. Well, I certainly, and Mr. Kirkland is the chief financial officer, and I don't think he did either. I don't know. I don't know what the difference is. I'd love for them to look and maybe talk and see what the differences is, but our understanding is the millage is a lot less. That's our understanding anyway.
Well, and I will answer it in a different way. And part of the ballot is not about salaries. I want to say that again. The ballot is not going to pay for salaries. But when you ask the differences in Mountain Brook and Homewood and Trussville, they're paying their teachers much, much more. The three highest paying school districts in the state are Mountain Brook, Homewood, and Madison City, which is Huntsville. So they are paying their teachers a lot more. Yeah, but this is not about salary, but that's something that they do that is different from what we do.
I'm not exactly sure what the numbers that you have are, but I'm a little bit familiar with it, and I think in my experience at looking at these things and trying to figure them out on my own is, and what I've discovered and learned from talking to people, is that a mill is not a mill in relation to where you live, because the mill is a percentage of your home value. And since their home values in Vestavia, in Homewood, and definitely in Mountain Brook are significantly higher than what Trussville has, they could, the millage rate could be a lower number, yet it generates much more revenue, which would be why we were looking to do a millage increase and why those numbers might be. I mean, I certainly didn't help Mr. Kirkland come up with these numbers, and I trust these numbers, but I know that a mill is not a mill, so it's not, it wouldn't be right to compare and say that a mill in Trussville is the same as a mill really anywhere else.
And I appreciate your question because it brought up teacher salaries, and this is not the forum for that. But if your property value increases with the quality of your schools, and you look at the value of one mill in Trussville at about $300,000, and that changes each year, one mill in Mountain Brook is worth $500,000. So if this really happens, and we get this high-quality school system, increased value of homes, there's no more tax increase, but our millage increases. One mill becomes worth more, and we can do more. It's like the pivotal moment in Trussville when everything breaks free and we get to do some things that we have needed to do and can't for this nominal amount. So I love where your question went, because it can take us to greater places than just this plan. I've got two hands up.
Okay, I'm going to address this gentleman's question about the bonds, because this is one thing I do know about. You asked who is going to be the city or if it's going to be the school board. One of the things that's done is an RFP is presented from the school, whether it's the city council, whether it's from the Board of Education. An RFP is presented to each and every one of the brokers that are around the area. And what they do is they bid on it. And so then they sit down with their group and they make the decision of who's got the best deal. Once that is made, then it goes to the first person as whether it's the broker or what have you, basically the house. Once they can have the option of selling those bonds, or they can sell them on the second market. So a lot of them, yes, the bonds that were sold by Trussville, yes, they were AA, some of them AA+, and it's all based on the Standard & Poor's different classifications. So they were good. And this issuance this last time, they were $109 to $112, which is over par, which means they were basically a very good bond. They were more secured. So I wanted to kind of address that for you because that was something that I knew. It's all up to the council to find out, the council or the Board of Education, to find out what is going to be the best person for them and how are they going to market those bonds and who is going to pay the most for them. And they will get the interest rate based on their value. Yes, the Board of Education does not have a credit standing. The city of Trussville does. So it does make perfect sense for the city. But they will have a legal obligation to each other of where that money is going to go from. Am I not correct, Ms. Neal?
That's correct. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm going to pass the microphone to this young man.
Thanks. So in the presentation, you said that there was 2 mills, there was 5 mills in order to build the schools, and then the additional 2 mills would be to administratively. Okay, so in 25 years, you're saying this will be repealed, correct?
It's not a repeal. It's
Expire? Okay. So if it takes 2 mills just to administratively staff these schools, how do you plan to do that after the 25 years after the expiration?
That's an excellent question. And it goes back to the young lady in the back who was talking about the value of a mill. Our prediction is that in 25 years, the mill would be worth more than it is today, and it would roll back into the answer to your question. Now, it can be on the ballot for renewal. We can do an automatic renewal, and the history of renewals in the state of Alabama is resoundingly yes. When people go to the polls to renew a tax, it means they don't have to pay any more. They just keep doing what they've been doing. And so there could be one of two things. If the mill hasn't increased to cover that, a renewal could go on a ballot, and it could just be renewed.
Okay. I have a few additional ones, if that's okay. The Cahaba School. So the last year that school operated with Clay, Chaltville, and Trussville being combined in 7th grade, that school held approximately 1,300 students. Now, granted, some of those students were in portable modular trailer in the back. Some of them were in the stadium. You're talking about not using the basement anymore. How many students are you saying before renovations that school would hold by itself?
In the state of Alabama, you cannot put kindergarten, 1st grade, or 2nd grade students on a 2nd floor. And so it was built originally for a high school, so it doesn't fit perfectly for an elementary school. Mm-hmm. So, Mr. Davis, you'll have to help me out on the renovation and the addition.
The Cahaba Project School. Mm-hmm. It'll be gone. Sure.
The board met and talked about how to use the Cahaba site for educating elementary students. We looked at 2 things. First of all, we looked at the fact that the historical Cahaba building, the historical project building, needed to be saved. We haven't been able, the Board of Education hasn't been able to do any maintenance on that building in about 6 or 7 years, and it's deteriorating. But we made a decision that we would not educate students in that building any longer. There are too many issues with that building for students to be resident in the building all day long. So we're going to use that building for administration, for various types of teaching that don't require the students to be in the building all day. That's one thing we knew. The second thing we knew is that there is a late 1980s, early 1990s era addition that was built on that site that holds 8 classrooms, and those classrooms are of adequate size to hold elementary students. So 8 times 20 would be about 160 students that we would be able to educate with an existing facility that's already there. It needs updating and painting and cleaning and that type of thing, but it's a good use of what the city and the system already have in place. So we need to build, so everything else on that site will be demolished. And what we'll then do is build classrooms that will take us to, I think, 400 initially. So, if you will, another 240 student capacity rooms. So you've got the front historical building being used for a non-teaching, daily teaching function. You've got these 8 classrooms that are being used and refurbished, which is good use of money. And then about another room for another 240 students to be put on that site initially. I think we can go up to 500 or so, but then that site is at capacity. Now, the Magnolia site will be similar in size initially, but because it's a 40-acre piece of land, we could build it out more so over time if needed.
So size-wise then, because we've talked about some of the extra programs and things that could be held at the Payne campus, and that is significantly, I'm assuming, would be a significantly bigger campus than these two. Is that a correct assumption? Correct. Okay, so if that's the case and we have all these programs at the Payne campus, how are we going to have the size to accommodate those same type programs and things at the new campuses? And if we don't, would that not change the quality of education that students are getting from one campus to the next? I've got one more.
Equality is paramount in the plan. And when you look at what we want to do at all three schools, it includes classrooms for all the things that Ms. Schmidt and Ms. Bruno mentioned, special education, music and art, and science labs at all of the schools. Because you can't have one school with more than other schools. That's just not fair. And that's not part of the plan. There will be a consistent checklist for all three schools, and it will be equitable.
So the curriculums that the children will be on would be the same. The activities, their availability to these computer labs, these science rooms, all that would be the same across the board.
You are right on target. It has to be. Yes, sir.
And then my final question. So right now, back in the FY 2012-2013 budget, there was about a $5.8 million that was allotted to the education fund. So I'm assuming that's additional revenue coming to the school. How is that going to be addressed with this? Will that remain, or will that be repealed? And I'm assuming that's coming from the sales taxes that we pay.
Okay.
So how will that be addressed, or will it be addressed? So will the sales tax remain, the additional sales tax plus the additional property tax?
Right. Now, I anticipated your question, and I think I have a slide that will help answer that. You're talking about the trust fund balance, the $5.7 million. That would be B. No. Okay. Then we'll go to slide B. Here we go. We have a trust fund balance of $5.7 million, and it's on this slide because it relates to the 1 cent sales tax. So for the 1 cent sales tax, bringing in proceeds of $6.1 million a year, which has been going on since 2002, it breaks down this way, and it pays for the high school debt service, the Payne campus debt service. Part of that goes into a trust fund, and then part of it goes to the school system right now into our general fund for general operations to pay our teachers, to pay support staff, and to pay for our facility maintenance. That's just a portion. So your question is a great question because sales tax fluctuates. And if something terrible happens and our sales tax doesn't come in, if we have another recession that's greater than the recession we just went through, or if we have a depression, the school debt is obligated and we have to pay it. And if the revenue of 6.1 doesn't come in, then we have to pull from that fund balance to pay it. It won't be forgiven. So your mind is right in, we're going to have to get you involved in our committees to solve these kinds of problems because sales tax is not a good way to pay school debt, but this is the way it's set up right now. But if you use sales tax to pay a school debt, you've got to have some sort of fund to pay your debt in case the sales tax doesn't come in.
Or if you talk of not continuing the education trust fund, the past administration set that up. That was very important for our school system in our city, and I agree with that. When you are sales tax dependent for this kind of thing, if a tornado like hit Tuscaloosa, hit Trussville, and we had a sales tax interruption because some of our malls got wiped out, there's a reserve over and above the required reserve that the school has. There's a trust fund that the city has that can help with those kinds of things, and that's what it's for. But the answer is I don't think there's any plan that I know of to repeal that. Yeah. Does that answer? Yeah.
All right. Just first of all, I want to thank y'all for coming tonight and for the work that y'all done on this project. A lot of misinformation and information out, especially in the age of social media. Just to clarify something, I've seen 400 and I've seen 500 as the capacity. Are we still kind of unsure, maybe roughly in the middle of where these schools are going to be? And, excuse me, what do we anticipate the capacity being day one? And I got to follow up to that as well.
Okay, that is a wonderful question, because if this passes, the next step is to draw zone lines for transportation. And when those zone lines are drawn for transportation only, we'll have the discussion with the school board at a retreat about what you might call open enrollment or intra-district transfer. But at the point that we actually have school zones for transportation, we'll know exactly if it needs to be 400 or 500. We wouldn't want to draw a line here and these people across the street go to a different school than those people. So, yeah, we want to. We've run through 400 or 500 depending on if this passes and we have zones.
That's a good question. I want to make sure if it turns out that we see that 400 is the right number to start with, they will be designed where the other 100, each one of them will be designed where another 100 can be added real easy. So it's just going to kind of depend on what the numbers projections are. But I've seen the same thing. Sometimes we say 500, sometimes we say 400, and it's going to be somewhere around those numbers. But 400 at each place may be the number, and we'll consider cost and all that. But it'll either be 4 with an option to add on, which probably would be the way we go.
All right, my follow-up to that, my only fear with this, and it seems like a lot of the, I hate to use the word blowback or concerns, is not as much about the money, it's more about principle and ensuring transparency. If it ends up being 400, and we go through this whole process and we pass this to get these kids out of trailers, and we open up these schools and they're at 85% day one, is that really the right, I mean, what have we really accomplished? Because if we're 18 months construction, we might as well say 2 years. You got 2 years of growth. If you're moving 600 kids out of Payne like we need to, then we got 600 kids going into them. My point is 7 mills enough? And I don't think it's a money issue. I think it's a principle issue, because what we were looking at up there, you're showing a $25,000 surplus. So that's, what, 1% of the total thing? That's cutting it really close. The only thing worse than having this discussion to get these kids out of trailers is having this discussion, looking up in 5 years and still having kids in trailers because we don't have the money. So let's do it or let's don't do it, but let's don't do just what we think the voters can approve or will approve, is my point.
We hit it in the middle because there were people in the audience that believe we had overplanned and that you're building too much. And your point I appreciate. You're saying we're not building enough. And we had to hear both sides of that. And we hit it in the middle and looked at our population projections.
You've got a good question that's got to be answered. Legally, that's all we can do. All we can do in Trussville, with a Trussville city that's already passed the legislature in years past, we can do that in Trussville without the state voting on it. If we went to 10, somebody suggested, well, let's go to 10 or 12 while we're at it. Well, if we do that, it would take a statewide election. That ain't going to be good. So all we can do in 7 mills, frankly, we've poured our heart into this thing. 7 mills will build these schools, and we think we'll operate them and do the things with the budget in Trussville. But that's a great question. If 10 or 12 would be great if it had it, but we just can't do it. Mayor, am I right on that? I mean,
Well, we mentioned earlier about catastrophes and construction costs and all that, but we're still talking about 2 years for construction. To only having a $25,000 cushion, that doesn't make me feel very comfortable that we're not going to have this same fight and then come back and, well, we didn't anticipate the growth, we didn't anticipate cost if we only got a $25,000 cushion. And let me just say this, and I'll shut up.
No.
If the average house is $13 to $17. Okay, well, what's an extra $3 to make sure that we get what we need?
I wish we could, because when you look at the money, I saw a lady on 3340 at 5 o'clock tonight, young mother, and she said something we haven't been saying. She said, "I'm all for it." She said, "I'll save more than $12 a month on gasoline." And I thought, well, that's you sure right. And all mothers that carry their kids to school would save more. But we appreciate your point, but it's the fact that we can't. Now that's another reason why we can't be too sure on the number. It may be that once everything is finalized and Dr. Neal gets everything finished, it may be that one of the schools needs to start off at 500 and one of them needs to start off at 400, depending on where all the kids do. But if we build 500 capacity for 500 each, Danny, and I didn't know Danny was standing there. He did a population study for us to see how many years that would get us out.
Yeah. That's what I was going to comment on. I'm a CFO by nature, and I do strategic planning. So when we looked at all this stuff, what I wanted to know was, what did the data show? So, Mayor, what's the projected growth for Trussville? Who knows? I mean, there's really no great data for that. So what I did was I went back and pulled the past 25 years from Trussville. Now, part of that was apples and oranges because we had Jefferson County, we had Clay kids that were here that moved off and whatnot. But I got all the data, and Trussville grew like this. When we moved here 23 years ago, we had, I think, 6,000 people, and now we're 22, whatever we are. So it went like this. So I looked at those growth rates by period and sorted out all the stuff to just get down to where it's truly what is now Trussville and what the growth rate has been there. And we went through that period during that recession where we were stagnant. But beyond that, we had subdivisions built and, plenty of things. Well, now some of that's coming back. So what I did was take all of that, and then I said, okay, I'm going to just plug in different growth rates, and I'm going to do it by school. And what was interesting was that when you look at everything and look at historical growth rates, I don't personally believe that we're going to grow in the next 5 years or 10 years like we've grown the last 10 years or before the recession. But I ran the numbers as if we would, and even change that. We're okay at the high school. The high school was built where it's easy to add a wing onto that, and we've got room there. The middle school, for some reason, in the Trussville growth plan, we grow in the elementary school, we grow in the high school, and the middle school, we don't. Now, part of me is wondering, why is that? And I don't know I don't have an answer. Part of me wonders, is it maybe because Trussville is a community that people move into, but that at some point people's careers maybe take them away, that at some point people move back in and they buy in the high school. I don't know the answer, but I even played with that. So if you take all the historical trends for 20 years, where we need growth, room is in the elementary school, and what we're building takes care of what I would call the severe growth scenarios that I don't even think we're going to see. Now we still have to break it down by unit, but in terms of the total population, I think this is going to adequately address the massive growth that we've seen in those growth spurts in Trussville, and we should be taking care of everywhere else. Now, I did that, which is not anything to do with, it's just the way I would do things in a business. Jim Kirkland, CFO, has a different way that he looked at it, and the way the educators looked at it. And I think at the end of the day, we compared our numbers, and we were like 50 students off. So I think two ways we've looked at it, analyzed it best we can, and we feel comfortable that what we're building will accommodate that. And I think it then becomes, how do we zone it? Does that help?
And I appreciate the dichotomy, the idea of us underbuilding and overbuilding. So, and we hit it in the middle.